Welcome to Things Hidden, the podcast. We're joined today by two friends of the program, been on the show. Well, Shane has not been on the show before. He's been on we did a film with him one time. We have Shane Kennedy. We have Shannon Braswell. This will also be simulcast on brightnews.com. Shout out to brightnews.com. Shannon, how you doing?
I'm good, bro. How you doing?
Good. And Shane,
Been a minute.
This your first time on Things Hidden, huh?
It is. It's a very proud moment for me.
Well, you've come a long way to get to this point, and you're gonna have a great discussion. So now you guys have been having some conversations by yourselves on your own podcast, Bright News, right? Tell us a little bit about what you guys been talking about lately.
Yeah, we just recently, what do we do, Shane? We had a conversation about social media.
And before that was revolutions or revolutionaries, I guess.
Yeah, revolutionaries and rebellions,
Yep.
and just a whole bunch of different stuff, man. We go from one end of the spectrum to another. You know, you never know what you're gonna get with us. We're always.
What's been a common through line through your conversations lately that you guys keep hitting back to?
I want to say most of it, the central point is how faith, and more importantly, Christianity is the linchpin, in most of our conversations. That's all important to us. And, that's really been our center of attention. So we focus mostly on that. That's what do you call it? Our dog in the fight.
Yeah.
Yep.
And now, what did you guys conclude about social media that was kind of like a takeaway point for someone that might want to listen to that podcast?
That there's more cons than pros.
There's more con artists than professionals.
Yeah, there are a lot of con artists on social media, and that it brings us digitally closer, but it builds a bigger geographical distance between us.
Why?
Right. Well, for one, there's just not that physical attachment. There's not that if you want to call it reciprocity, there's not a sense of reciprocity there. Positive mimesis. You can say just about anything online, right, without actually having to, be next to a person, face to face, right? So, a person can say anything about how they feel, but doesn't necessarily translate to a positive communication, right? And then secondly, more importantly for me, it's like having that communion with another person, being able to sit down with them and talk and have meaningful conversations, right? I think social media does a lot in the way of probably dividing people more than it does bringing them together, right? So that's my, that's why I say I think there's a little more of a con than a pro. Of course, that's not to say you can't have meaningful conversations through social media. We're doing that now, right? But I think there's a lot of, tension when people start to have conversations online, and what becomes of that is, maybe it gets lost in translation. What you meant to say is not what you said, and it gets taken out of context, right? So, those are the two takeaways for me.
Well, and for me, I guess it would be that social media at its best is a reflection of human relationships and is a reflection of reality. But at its worst, it is reality. And I think that's the problem in the time that we're living in now, is that social media is becoming more and more and more the reality for people, rather than it being a reflection of of the real physical communion that happens between people, like what you said, Shannon.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking about the social media conversation about around what happened with Scott Adams. Shannon, you kind of posted a little bit about that at Bright News, didn't you?
Yeah. So there was a couple of articles that came out. One from the New York Post. This one was kind of an aftermath, wherein what's his name, Elon Musk, you know, uh, said something on Twitter, and of course the news ran with that, the media ran with that, saying that he was in support of what Scott Adams said. But the whole point was Scott Adams, he runs his own podcast on YouTube, and of course, he's the creator of Dilbert, and he says some things in regards to his reaction to a poll that was done in regards to, is it okay to be white, right? And so he said, I guess the poll had a number of a percentage of Black people that responded negatively, saying that it's not okay to be white. And from that poll, his reaction was basically, my advice. I'm paraphrasing. My advice is for white people to get away from Black people. Just stay away from them, because that's a hate group, right? So that was the gist. And then
Because the
there was,
poll said, because the poll asked the question, what do you think about, do you agree with the statement, it's okay to be white? Is that what it was?
right,
By Gallup?
right, but yeah, and I mean, I guess he took that to mean that from this poll, most Black people don't like white people, or that most Black people have a disdain for white people.
What was it?
And so
51% said they didn't agree with the statement, it's okay to be white. Was that the thing he was reacting to?
I think so. It might have been 51, like, I don't know, something like that, 48 to 51 or something like that. But I mean, his reaction was uh, pretty shocking, I think, to a lot of social media, content creators. Even within uh, you know Black conservative groups. You know, uh, like the what's the name? The twins. You know, um, their whole reaction was basically, you know, why would you say something like that? Because it only fuels the frustration, or it only fuels the uh, racism that white hate groups are trying to promote, right? Um, but there are others, like Kwame Brown did a commentary on it, and his whole question was, well, is he saying what a lot of white people feel? Is he just saying the quiet part out loud? And what if white people actually begin to start feeling this way, right? What if white people actually, as a majority, start um, acting on that? What is the result of that? What is it going to be like, right? Do Black people really want white people um, adhering to a statement like that? So there's a lot of, there's varying degrees of opinion, on his statement. And I think that, for someone to say that, we shouldn't take it lightly, because I do think that if something like that were to ever actually be the case, and we're looking at a very different world, right? We're looking at a very different America, you know. Um, but yeah, that's what he said, and he's been sort of deplatformed, or want to say his comic strip has been taken down from like all the major news companies. So, and I'm, hey, maybe he probably knew that was going to happen. He probably figured that that's the result of it, but just didn't care.
Yeah, Shane, what did you think of that, what he said?
Well, I thought it was quite a reaction for him. There's a part of me that wonders if I would personally like to see what I know that the question was, I know that the question on that poll or survey, it was something about it. I think it was asking the question, is it okay, do you agree with the statement, it is okay to be white, or something like that. But I'd like to know if that was a standalone question, or if that was a question that was a part of a series of questions.
Yeah.
Because it could have been the caboose of a series of questions that were leading the people, like, it could have been questions like, how do you feel about slavery? How do you feel about Jim Crow laws? How do you feel about this? And then at the very end, then it could have been asking the question, do you agree with the statement, it is okay to be white? I would guess that there was probably some kind of framing to it that would lead people to answer that particular question that way. I don't know. I really don't know either way, but that's the first thing that came to my mind was what did that actual survey or poll look like that question was a part of? Was that a standalone question, or was it a part of a series that would have led people to answer in a way that they wouldn't have otherwise? And then obviously he reacted to it. I don't know what his personal political background is, but he may be someone that is I know he said that he felt like he had personally done a lot to crusade for civil rights and things throughout his life. So he, clearly he was very upset with that response. Feeling like he deserved a certain level of maybe accolades or something. Maybe he felt like he had been a proponent for justice and everything throughout his life, and that maybe he felt like, well, that would be okay for them to feel that way about other white people, but not about me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Did you see he did an interview with that Hotep Jesus guy? I saw a little bit of that, and he said that I wanted to do that to throw the table up to change the conversation. So he said you can be rich and famous and successful, but you can also cash that in for your free speech. And he said, I was willing to let go and get canceled because I'm at the point where I want to retire anyways. So I'm at the point where I can cash my public fame and reputation out for the cause of free speech to force the conversation. So he said, my job was this was a 3-act play, and act 1 was to make this scandal. Act 2 is the reaction. Act 3 is when he gets to have the conversation with people like he did with Hotep Jesus, where he was able to talk to someone with a frank conversation saying, obviously I was making a point that, if this is how you want to think about me, then I don't want to be around you. And if I look at it the way he thinks, Scott Adams is kind of like he's a negotiator type person. He likes to think about strategic negotiations and stuff and persuasion. And I think what he was doing a technique where you walk away,
Mhm.
You walk away from the deal to see what happens, to see
Yeah.
it's a little bit different kind of walk away, but kind of like, okay, if you don't want to be around me, then I don't want to be around you. And just to
Yeah.
be able to cash in his notoriety with a scandal like that allows him to have the ears to have a conversation that he wants to have, which is, uh, you know, actually trying to find things that unite people rather than divide people.
Right. So it's like he's by doing that move, he's forcing the conversation to be had, in public, right? Now, my thing is this, like, you know, um, you know, even with his reaction, you know, it begs to question, like, what is really at the heart of this, right? Um, is it that white people, or he himself, and maybe a whole host of people who aren't saying it out loud, are tired of the black rhetoric, that they're seeing in the mainstream media, right? And then the other thing is, who are the black people who are the black people that are saying this, right? Most of the black people who are making these claims that, um, there's a stain on white people, or they have something to be ashamed of for being white. You find most of them to be like, you know black liberals, you know uh, your Cornell Wests, um, your Michael Eric Dysons, right? And then on the flip side, you have the white liberals who are basically saying that white people do have to be ashamed, or they have to have white guilt for what they have done, right? So that's you know your whatever her name is, something D'Angelo, right? She made that book, White Fragility,
Mm.
you know. So the question is who is fueling this tension, you know? And I think that it tends to be uh, black intellectuals who think they know what they're talking about by targeting white people in general, right? And white liberals, say white liberal women who are wealthy enough to stay at home and not do anything but make TikTok videos all day, and tweet all day, and make Instagram videos all day about why white people have to feel ashamed of being white. Maybe, his reaction. So what I would say is his reaction was uh, directed at the wrong in the wrong in the wrong direction. His reaction, I think, and this is not to scapegoat anybody. I'm not trying to scapegoat, but I think you have to place the blame where it belongs, right? Which is on the people that are propping up uh, these types of speakers, they're allowed to be on CNN, they're allowed to be in, Ivy League schools, teaching on critical race theory, teaching on LGBTQ, whatever the hell else they have, uh, you know, allowed to speak against the Western culture, Western values, right? Uh, Speak in the name of socialism and Marxism, right? They're allowed to spew that stuff without any, uh, you know, counter argument, right? And if there and it seems to me like when there is a counter argument, a lot of those voices are suppressed, right? They get suppressed by the media, right? So someone who who would say, well, I'd rather be around a redneck white person than be around a white liberal.
Yeah.
You can't say that, right? Because the media says, well, the redneck is actually the racist. The redneck is the and I'm using that as quote unquote, the redneck is the real problem, right? They are the ones who really have an issue with you. But I would say that from the way I see it, white liberals have been the ones to initiate a lot of this, voting for things that really don't vibe, I think, culturally with Black people, right? And we haven't picked up on that yet. I think, we as Black people have not, Black Americans have not picked up on that and have not built solidarity with, say, maybe white people that actually probably have more in common with us than we think, right?
So I just looked it up, and Scott Adams describes himself as being kind of libertarian, but not entirely libertarian. He's in favor of I guess he's kind of like socially liberal, and then maybe like economically conservative, probably similar to the South Park guys, I guess. But something I wanted to say is, I think there's a civil war going on within the American left, especially within kind of like the white liberal elites of the country, where they're, as Marxists, they're trying to figure out how they define class in the country. They're trying to figure out, do we define it on racial lines, or do we define it on economic lines? And the problem is that for a long time, I think that the waters have been muddy. I think that they've been able to base it on racial whenever it's convenient, and then on economic whenever it's convenient. But now I think with the temperature rising to the degree that it has in our country right now, I think you have to go with one or go with the other if you're somebody who's obsessed with class, which they are, So I think this kind of speaks to a bigger question of, how do we group people? How do we understand people, and how do we articulate political ideology? Do we articulate it based on racial exploitation, and or do we base it on economic exploitation? And I think if you just kind of take a lay of the land, especially of the left, which really isn't very hard to do. All you have to do is just put on CNN, MSNBC, you can just watch any of the mainline news, and go look at the New York Times and stuff, and you can pretty much categorize any of those journalists into one of those two categories, into someone who throws everyone in the race bucket, or sorts everybody by race, or somebody who sorts everyone by socioeconomics, or by economic status, by income level, or maybe poverty level, or something like that.
Right. Yeah.
What do you guys think about that?
So you're saying they gotta delineate who's going to be the scapegoat?
Yeah. And also too, I think they're trying to get down to, because they're obsessed with class conflict, and it's really hard to have class conflict if you don't have strictly defined what the class is, whether the class is race versus race, or if the class is economic group versus another economic group.
Yeah, I mean, I heard this one time, somebody was saying, I don't remember who this is, but somebody was saying that, a Black liberal will get along with a white liberal, but so, like, all the things that, say, these Black celebrities, right, they advocate for, whether it's the black women that we see in entertainment, right? Like the Cardi B's and the Megan Thee Stallions and all these other women, right? Uh, Oprah would never bring like a black girl who who wants to imitate Cardi B or Megan Thee Stallion to the Hamptons or to Martha's Vineyard, right?
Right.
And a white liberal would never do that either, right? But they'll continue to advocate on TV for the debauchery that that you know that black people are quote unquote supposed to be, that they're supposed to engage in, right? They would never bring somebody from the hood to a place like that, right? And that shows you that the way that they think of black people really is sort of like, it's cool for show. It's cool because it's entertaining, and it's entertaining to the masses. But really, they think of black people as like deplorable, or as you know, people that they really don't want around, because that's the culture that they really belong to is unwanted, right? So for me, it's like, well, then what does it take for black people to stop being seen in that light? Well, one, I think it would take us to say, we're not going to take those deals. We have to act in this way, right? Where we have to be promiscuous. We have to be looked at as violent, right? Where we have to be violent towards our own kith and kin. Like, why is it okay for me as a black person, as a black man, to look at another black man as hostile, right? Or have this hostility towards him the first time I see him, but it's not okay. Like you wouldn't, Kwame Brown was saying, would you do that to a white man, right? That you see, the same things you do to a black, as a black man, would you do the same things to a white man that you did do to a black man, right? It really boils down to how black people want to be perceived in the world, right? And how we want to see ourselves. And I think if and this is despite Scott Adams' comments, we have to really think about our culture and what we are putting out there to the world, right? Because people judge you based on the way you behave, right? They judge you based on your actions. And if white liberals want to, use me as a as a as a step and fetch it, you know what I mean, and toe tapping for entertainment, then to me, those people don't have my best interest at heart, right? And I need to remove myself from those people, right? The people that are promoting that kind of behavior, and only want to see me live an affluent life as long as I debase myself, right? And I think that's the real conversation that needs to be, that black people need to have, and that white people who care, and just Americans who care in general need to advocate for that, right? That it's time to leave. Go ahead. Yeah.
Leave what?
It's time to leave that culture behind. You know what I mean? I don't know, I mean, Thomas Sowell says that, it's a culture. It is rooted in what do you call it? The Scotch Irish culture, right? So really, I guess it comes from the fringes of British culture, right? So, you know, uh, the way I see it is, somehow uh, the fringes of British culture. So like uh, maybe people who lived in Wales or the Scottish Highlands and things like that, Northern Britain, we're sent here. Um, now this is my assumption. We're sent here as criminals, right, to be removed the the main from Britain, and they kept that culture, that lawless culture, right? And somehow African Americans, we picked that up, and we've continued to, uh, have that as a sort of mainstay within our culture, right? Um, and so uh, media has used that, that debaucherous culture as a means to, make money, right? And we as Black people, you know, um, have used it to get ahead in life, right? Um, but we have to really think about the fact that, like, most of the young rappers who are rapping today, most of the, whether they be men or women, you know, um, they're not promoting anything that's beneficial for African American, for Black Americans. We I mean, you're seeing a lot of deaths happen. I mean, and these are young Black kids who have a lot of money and probably just don't know what to do with it. You know what I mean? They don't have guidance, right? And you know, that's something that, you know, Black people, we have to think about that. You know,
Well, they've tried there is some kind of malevolent entity that's trying to get Black people to hate success. There's a
right,
malevolent entity of groupthink and stuff that is creating a narrative that's constantly putting movies into their blockbuster films to remind them that they are slaves and all these different things,
Yeah.
to perpetuate a feeling of I'm never going to be able to succeed, so therefore I can, I am rightfully owed in certain things like envy and resentment and everything else, and that's just demonic. And
but
I think it's a spirit of empire that actually is doing that. The spirit of
yeah,
empire. America has killed 20 million people in the United States government's foreign policy has killed an estimated 20 to 30 million people since 1945.
right. So
So
so so my
Wow.
that was after the Holocaust. So we've created several Holocausts,
sure.
and
So
that
so
violence is coming back home to roost.
so my answer to that is, it's not about, it's not that they're teaching us to hate success, it's that they're teaching us to hate positive behavior. You know what I mean? They're okay with us being successful as long as we do it the way that they tell us to, right? Which is through violence, through promiscuity, through drugs, through, crime, right? That's okay to do, right? That's okay for us to engage in. It's okay for us to make uh video series, about a crime syndicate, or some uh you know whatever drug pen that lived in the 1920s, or whatever it is. It's okay for us to make movies like that, as long as we're seen in a negative light, right? And then if it's a positive light, then it has to be that, well, uh somebody has to be to blame for our problems, right? So the positive is always in some civil rights movie, right? Some slave movie, right? Where we overcome racial issues, right? It's never like talking about the great Black mathematicians, right? Or great Black doctors, right? It's always people that either, like you said, have some kind of envy and have some kind of anger towards the past, or it's I gotta be I gotta do things, you know, by any means necessary. I have to get the wealth. And I came up in a violent neighborhood, and this is what I had to do to succeed, right? And it paid off in the long run. Yes, I spent time in prison, or yes, I, did this and that, but it was all part of the game in order for me to, to get somewhere in life, right? As long as we continue to do that, then I mean, that's how people are going to see us, and it's not even just about people seeing us that way. Like, I think it's really demoralizing, to always be seen like that, to always have that image over your head, that wherever you go, that's what you're associated with. Because I can tell you right now, I know, if I went somewhere else outside of America, that's how they would see me. You know what I mean?
They would see you as what?
As probably as like, oh, he's Black. That means, like, oh yeah, man, what did you, what kind of crime did you commit to get over here? You know what I mean? What did you have to do to make your money to be successful? You know what I mean? You can't be just like somebody who worked hard, kept his nose to the grindstone, and loves God and who's a Christian and believes in family values, and everything, panned out the way it was supposed to, right?
I think if Christianity continues to fall apart, then Scott Adams is describing, and I'm going to read a quote from our friend Surratt here, who writes for neighborschoice.com, that, in a post-Christian society, Scott Adams is describing the actions that people will take, which is to cling into enclaves. And so if we're going to follow a Christian standpoint, God doesn't grade on a curve,
mm-hmm.
as it relates to your ethnic identity. Now, the American
Mm-hmm.
government tries to pretend like they grade on a curve, but they don't. It's a false promise, right? Because it comes with a certain asterisk to it saying, hey, we're going to coddle you. We're going to infantilize your identity as an ethnic group that will be infantilized perpetually, but that comes with a certain cost.
Mm-hmm.
Abortion, broken homes, right? Hopelessness, crime that never gets fixed, cities that are in absolute despair.
Mm-hmm.
So it's always, Satan always comes with I'll take care of you. Give me your burden. You're tired, aren't you? You've been picked on systemically. Let me use that word, systemically. Government says, we'll use that word again. You've been picked on systemically. You've been harmed systemically. So come to our system and we'll take care of it. But what did he got for it? He got broken homes, destroyed neighborhoods, roads that have holes in them, violence, killings, and insanity. And now it's transgenderism is the next thing that the government wants to sell to the Black community. They have a vested interest in doing that because I think the Black community, because they endured slavery and other abuses by government and society, they were a natural, libertarian, independent spirit, self-reliant community. And the government systematically went after them to try to cripple what could be one of the biggest oppositions in terms of a voting bloc voting for liberty and destruction of liberty. They wanted to absolutely destroy their ability to resist whatever it was that would be in the interest of the government. So
Right. And so now here's the question though. Are Black people in helping to promote that amongst Black people? You know, I mean, think about Gabrielle Union.
Who's that?
Right. She's the wife of, you know, that former basketball player who played for Miami Heat. You know, his son is a girl now.
Oh,
right? He considers himself to be a woman, and they're literally like promoting. They're okay with their son becoming a girl. I can tell you that when I was a kid, that no, you know, practically no Black person I knew would have been okay with that. Okay, it didn't matter if they voted Democrat or Republican. You know, so you know, my thing is that you know, Black people have a choice to walk away from the, you know, the whatever the government is putting out there. We don't have to accept that, right? But my thing is it's more of a it hurts more when Black celebrities are helping to promote it. Black politicians are helping to promote it. Black intellectuals who know better. They know this. They know that this is wrong, but they will continue to find any kind of way to say it's okay. You know, I mean, there was a Black journalist, I forget what his name is, but I mean, he was really arguing with Candace Owens about the fact that, you know, men can have babies. Now, you know, here you are, you know, you're a former professor at Temple University. You know, you've made lots of money off of spewing this stuff, and you have the nerve to try and find a way around that argument and say that, you know, men can have children. You know, it's not normal. And the fact that the fact that you have people in Black communities who, you know, for whatever reason feel the need to promote that kind of, you know, whatever the hell they're doing. It just, and then on top of that, the fact that Black people keep voting for things that go against our own interest. It just, you know, for me, I'm sorry, it doesn't make sense. And I know this because I have family members that do it all the time. You know, they'll listen to Bishop Noel Jones and Bishop so-and-so on Sunday, but they'll turn around and say, you know, well, them Republicans, they're just the worst thing, you know, because they're racist and they don't, you know, they don't have any, you know, interest in Black people. Look at the ones who are keeping you in this position. Look at the ones who are making, you know, telling you it's okay to be a Black woman and be on your own and be self-sufficient and you don't need no man. Who's saying that? That's mental illness, man. I'm sorry, but it, you know, that's a mental, that's crazy, right? And and again, it's not biblical. It's not, right? That's not to say that men, you know, Black men don't have our part to play in this, and we have to be accountable for the things that we've done, right? For starters, not being stewards, allowing the government to run us out of the home, right? We should have been rebuking that from day one and said, we're not going nowhere. This is our house. You understand what I'm saying? We should have been doing that. So, again, I think there's accountability on both sides. There's accountability with the Black community, that we have to recognize our shortcomings and stop propping up Al Sharpton and Jesse Jackson and Michael Eric Dyson and Umar Johnson, okay, and Robin DiAngelo, okay. They need to go. They need to be rebuked and quieted down, and because they're not doing us no service. And Cornel West too, if I didn't say his name already.
Say, did you want to weigh in?
Well, I can't help but, ask the question, or just kind of think to myself, what is the proper? So it seems like from the very beginning, and I think this has its beginnings in I think it has its origins in the British Empire, is our fixation on organizing society based upon race, from the top down. Now, if people decide to self-segregate, or if people decide to just congregate together because they speak a similar mother tongue, they look alike, they eat the same kind of food, they have the same extent, distantly extended family or something, that's a different conversation. But the thing is, from the very beginning, there has always been this movement within the entire British world, which America is definitely a part of that, to try to structure things from the top down based upon race. You want to keep white people separate, you want to keep Black people separate, you really don't want them mingling too much. And then people from all other different races, you want to keep the Native Americans separate, you want to keep everybody separate. There's been this fixation, and the examples I would point to are the United States, which our mother is the British Empire. Look at Australia with the Aborigines. You can look at South Africa, the whole apartheid. A lot of people don't know this, but apartheid was not a policy that was established by the Dutch settler, by the descendants of the Dutch settlers, the white Dutch settlers that originally went to South Africa in the 1600s. They were pilgrims. It was actually the British that imposed apartheid on South Africa, because they viewed it as being more expedient for mining and stuff. Because the reason that the British wanted all the wanted to bring to import a lot of Black people, including enslaved people, down to South Africa, was so they could put them to work in the mines and pay them nothing or next to nothing. So then you went, so I guess what my point is that the way that the British organize things, you can even see this in the way that the British organize, like the Methodist churches and stuff, and the Episcopal churches. They always kept everything separated. They always kept the races separate. You even see this in Freemasonry too. To this day, Freemasonry is a segregated organization, and that's all British. So I guess what I guess the thing that I can't help but think about is, how do we break this fixation with organizing society based upon race? And I'm not saying to force people to integrate that don't want to integrate, but there is this obsession with keeping the races arbitrarily separate. And then these white liberal elites want to keep Black people in the Black community. They want to keep them away. They want to stay separate from them. These white elites are are not trying to move into Black communities at all.
Mhm.
But they want to keep them as this pitiful victim that they're crusaders for. And
Yes.
somehow and then that help, and because they have these feelings of pity and sympathy for Black people, it makes them justify living their very privileged lives,
Right.
where they live in a big house, and they probably own multiple homes. They have a very nice living. They may or may not work. They may have inherited the money that they live off of, which hey, to each his own. But they're trying to make themselves look like they are the vicars of justice in society, which they're not. And I just can't help but think that they're secretly or even unconsciously fighting to maintain the status quo, because if they can't justify, or if they can't argue to themselves and to other people that they're crusaders for Black people, who are they going to be crusading for?
Right. Right.
What would their identity be at that point?
Well, a lot of
And
people. Go ahead.
here, David, one more thing. And I think that what these people need to do is bow down before Jesus Christ as King. Because if they bow down before Jesus Christ as King, that's where they're going to find their identity. It's not in being a crusader for these distant the distant Black people that they never encounter in their day-to-day life, and that they never intend to encounter either.
Right. Right.
But they like to go to those African countries and do those photos where they do the photo with the kids. Like,
Yeah, they take selfies.
Mm-hmm.
They treat people like they are like pets of theirs. Have you noticed that?
Yes. They're tokens.
Like they're slow pets. Like,
They're tokens.
That's probably why those hipsters like to adopt those dogs with 3 legs too, because they like the dog that can't quite move on its own without some support. They like to control people.
Right.
You ever go to the farmer's market and see all them liberals with 3-legged dogs? You say, I never know they had that many 3-legged dogs. That sounds like y'all got that from a factory. Y'all taking the dog to the factory and chopping it off. All right, it's liberal friendly. Go ahead, take care of it. It can't get food on its own. Put some seed oil biscuits in its little plate, and it's just sickly and dying, and it's always needing the vet. And it said, "Oh, you can't survive without me."
Right.
That's how they treat humans too. Dear God.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But
they'll even put the 3-legged dog in a stroller and wheel it around at the farmer's market too.
Man, I've seen it. I've seen it.
But let's be real about this. I want to go back to some of the hidden victims of America, because these liberals, or whoever you want to call them, we got to find out who owns these media outlets and figure out why they want to keep pushing this, because it's funny how we have 20 to 30 million people murdered by American foreign policy since the 1945s. That's not funny, but it is funny how we're not told that is a moral crusade we should take on. Isn't that interesting?
But David, what's their justification? Their justification is always we're spreading democracy, and if you go back to the 19th century and you look at what the British used to justify justify setting up apartheid and all the weird British racial oppression and stuff that they spread throughout the British Empire, it was always, well, we're spreading civilization.
Right.
And I think that's the British were not spreading civilization by oppressing people. Yes, civilization was spread by the Brits, but it was not spread by segregating races arbitrarily and stuff. In the same way that America is not spreading democracy by bombing poor people in other countries that don't look like us.
But America's government has a history of lying, cheating, stealing, and stabbing their enemy, their friends in the back over and over again. Look at what happened to the folks in South Vietnam that were expecting to have weapons given to them. Remember, they promised them that, right?
Yes.
But we're going to give you weapons, and the Congress never appropriated the money. Not one dime went to them. And they also left their Vietnam POWs over there. That's how America's government thinks of its people. That's how much America's government thinks of the people of the world. And why would we ever listen to the American government or any of its state media organs like the trash New York Times How many millions of people of color have the New York Times murdered with their lies in the service of the empire of the American government and the British Empire? They have continually lied and murdered every kind of color you can ask for, and the blood is on their hands. And anybody who perpetuates that lie that those wars are just. And that's the thing, man, is we can't allow them to control the narrative. I don't want to talk about this race stuff. At the end of the day, it's got to go back to the anthropology. It's got to go back to the human person. It's got to go back to indicting the murderers who are lying us into wars to kill 30 million people since 1945 and counting. And they continue to do it. Look at what they do in Yemen right now. They're starving. And these stupid 1619 Project quoting people don't give a damn about Yemen people.
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because some Hollywood mogul didn't put millions of dollars to make them care. That's how stupid they are and how morally vacuous they are. All it takes is to get a Hollywood mogul to put a few $1 million into some dark money funding campaign, put a t-shirt together with a cool font made from a Brooklyn hipster font logo shop, and you can make a Yemeni kid the next big star. But why does that not happen? Because victimism always flows where the money flows. It's not real concern for victims like Christ gives us. So we shouldn't take our marching orders. Scott Adams, nobody should be taking our marching orders from these morally dubious, disgusting entities. Like, who is the New York Times to tell Scott Adams what he's done wrong? The New York Times has maimed and murdered millions of people as a handmaiden for the United States government. Period. Period. The New York Times has displaced millions of Africans in Libya because they lied for the murderer Obama. The New York Times has lied and enabled black site torture, where people's fingernails are torn out piece by piece, where they are drowned in water over and over again. That's the New York Times. They have no right to lecture anybody about what happened, about people's words, when they do nothing but murder people with their lies. You know, they are sending people into death. Look at what Sir Dasgupta said. This is his reaction to Scott Adams' video. He says, this is what happens to a society when it consciously decides to remove Christ from all public forums and credits only itself for all of its achievements. Scott Adams is justified in thinking this way, but he is also confused because he does not have a Christian worldview. The Christian worldview is one of self-sacrifice. When one reads the lives of the saints and the crucifixion of Christ, one can immediately see how political projects are futile. Preaching the gospel to the blacks is much more important than converting them to MAGA. In the past, blacks received the gospel, but many of them were allowed to twist it into a cult of righteous self-pity and in-group messianism. This is needed to be called out. Nothing short of repentance will do. St. Paul did not lie in Galatians 3:28 when he said that we are all one in Christ. But we have to be in Christ. Without Christ, without the triune God, there cannot be unity in diversity. Without recognizing that all tribes are guilty of violent human sacrifices, there cannot be reconciliation. Only when I see in myself the sins that I have caused others will I be able to help others. Nothing else can be a substitution for Christian repentance. Not critical race theory, not MAGA, not libertarianism, nothing except for Jesus.
Right. Well, I would say, you know, amen to that, right? The caveat though is that even, you know, like and I think he might have mentioned this in his statement. Christianity in the Black community has been hijacked too by Black liberation theology. I know you guys know what that is, right? Mm-hmm. You know, it's all about how can we have how can the Gospels be used for social justice, right? How can the gospel be used to further, you know, a political standpoint? So, you know, how do you disconnect Black liberation theology, you know, liberation theology, where, you know, with the Jesuits, how do you disconnect that stuff from the true gospel? You know, because it seems like that, and I'm not saying like it's not just Black liberation, like it's with the Methodists, right? Like every church that I see that's Methodist today has a rainbow flag. Like that's their cause right now.
Sometimes
You
they
know,
have two.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Like that's their thing, you know. And so it's all about social justice when it comes to the Gospels, when it comes to Christianity. So how can we get people to, you know, what is the alternative? I guess that'd be my question, because, you know,
We're going to find that out real quick when the empire dies. So that's what we're going to find out. All of this stuff that we're doing, all this critical theory stuff, is imperial decadence. It's subsidized by empire. Once the American empire collapses and we're no longer able to export our inflation abroad, we will feel the violent anti-civilizing effects of all the copious spending that goes into useless programs like what you see with critical theory and diversity, equity, inclusion, and all this stuff. Suddenly, all that money that is being flooded, when it's not able to be exported out because people shift away from the dollar, slowly but surely, all that credit's going to start to erode the fabric of the economic prosperity that we've long benefited from. And you're going to see a decline in merit. You're going to see a decline in infrastructure. You're going to see a decline in overall basic foundations of what we expect from what we've come to expect in America. And that's when we're going to see the real. Now, unfortunately, that's what's so evil about our government is they spend so much of their time trying to stoke the groups to get into racial tribalism just in time for this collapse starting to happening, right? And then all of a sudden, now you've primed the pump for everybody to fight on each other so that you can lock down tyranny again, you know? But I mean, that's what's going to happen is that we can't, this critical stuff would have never been able to have a foothold financially without the empire. Without the blood of innocent people of color around the world, critical theory would have never had any financing. Does that make sense? That's the irony of it all.
Yeah.
Isn't
that ironic?
It's scary is what it is, bro.
It is.
You know, you can.
What's scary about it to you?
You know, because what you're saying sounds apocalyptic, and not in the sense of it's going to be revealed. Everything will be revealed. You know, that sounds a little more like, you know.
Well, here's my message. My message is, if we rediscover what it means to be Christian, we'll cure the diseases and we'll cure the pollution and we'll create energy too cheap to meter faster than they can create barbarian, savage war against all. So it's up to us to be the Christians faster than they can be the false messiahs that lead us into tribal violence. Does that make sense? We can alleviate the pressures of the scapegoating mechanism by creating post-scarcity conditions for things like diseases, pollution, and basic materials that we need to have civilization. That's what Christians should be doing right now. We should be in an apocalyptic moment. Every single day, we should be waking up and plotting on Zoom. How are we going to get elemental transmutation? How are we going to get anti-gravity? How are we going to get ocean water powering each one of our homes now, every single day? How are we going to get the cures for cancer out to the public? How are we going to coordinate diabetes cures? All of that needs to be happening now, not 5 years from now, not 50 years from now, because if we don't do those things now, we are going to be all in a world of absolute hurt because they have primed people to hate each other by tribe. And you see where the right's going. The right is starting to flirt more and more with identitarianism again, right? That is a trick. And the only way you solve that is by individual skin in the game, causing alleviation of scarcity in the world of atoms, which is incarnational truth. And when you do that, You can overcome through sheer wealth creation the decline in the economy that we're going to have because the fiat currency standard is going to fall apart. We can overcome that not just through economic prosperity, but also through the hopes and wonders and orientation of the human spirit saying, wow, we can fly again. You know?
Yeah, that makes it. You say it's more like an outpacing. It's an outpacing.
You have to outpace the forces of building have to outpace the forces of decivilization and destruction. Yeah. And right now, and it's not a the good thing is it takes one Nikola Tesla to beat an army of D'Angelos. Right. You see what I mean? One Tesla is worth billions and billions of these stupid, useless D'Angelos or whatever the hell their name is. Mm-hmm. See what I mean? One Tesla kicks all that. Mm-hmm. You know, in the name of Jesus, of course, right? In the name of Jesus, we incarnate the things that the people need to be able to get off each other's throats. Okay. And that's the thing is that, you know, the reason why our youth are so in decline, you know, I think it's a miracle that we're not fighting more. You know, I keep seeing all these videos of teenagers beating each other and it looks like there's racial things going on. And I don't know, you know, and they keep posting it. It's becoming it was always a thing, but now it's becoming more of a mainstream conservative media thing to talk about. And I keep thinking to myself, man, in some ways, I'm surprised it's not worse already because we have been in artificial stagnation for decades. You know, I mean, you could trace it to the 1960s like Peter Thiel does, but you could trace it even further back. You know, we have not had great, tremendous actual innovation in the world of atoms. When children live in a society with decades and decades and decades of decline and stagnation in the world of atoms, what do you think they're going to do? Mm-hmm. There's nothing to work for. Right. Your biggest dream is to what? Be some diversity, you know, inclusion, whatever thing, equity. You know, your biggest dream is to be Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Who wants to be like that? Who wants to imitate that mindless nothingness, this nothingness? That's the only thing the American government is good for is creating lots and lots of opportunities for lies and destruction around the world. And then the other thing that they're good for is creating all kinds of frictions between neighbors that didn't exist to this before, or at least inflaming them. And then they're really good at creating a lot of what we would call hypersensitive people. Like Larry Johnson, the former CIA officer I had on my show, he said, Russians figured out how to do hypersonic missiles. And I said, yeah, and we figured out how to produce hypersonic people. Hypersensitive people, because that's all we got. They're over there. They've got engineers that have outpaced us on every piece of technology that matters in a war. We are wide open in our homeland right now for a nuclear strike. We don't even have a defense shield. It's almost as if the people that run the United States government do not care about the United States government's people. It's almost as if they're renters of a home that are trashing it up as they work their way out. You ever seen those stories of these renters that rent a home and they just utterly trash it? Mm-hmm. That's the United States government and its bureaucrats and its crony capitalist friends. They are just trashing out the home, the assets of the people as they, you know, march their way out maybe to something else. But it doesn't feel like the people who really are in the decision-making places of our government and our culture really have the best interest of the American people at mind at all. Otherwise, they wouldn't be doing every single thing they can to pit us against each other and keep us stuck and stupid. Go look at what, like Teal says, look at our trains. They're falling apart. Look at our subways. Look at our rockets. We can't even get back to the moon. It takes forever. It used to be, they allegedly they could do that on a calculator and all these little basic things. Now they can't do it. So we're covering up for our lack by coming up with all these fanciful things to pick at one another. Well, guess what? It'll take us 100 years to get back to the moon, but it'll be the most diverse cast ever to step foot on the moon. That's what a psychopath murderer tells you. As a society, that's what a psychopath murderer culture says. They say, well, you know what? It'll take me 100 years to do what people 100 years ago did in like a few years. But look what I have for you. I have these shiny new toys called, you know, tokens. That's all I got. That's all they got for us. They can do tokenism, and they can create resentments and envies, and they can come up with more novel ways to justify you becoming a slave to your passions and your sexual ambitions.
Or we won't get to the moon at all. It'll be like a real apocalypse. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Where we're all barricaded inside of our house, trying to, watch out for the next person who's coming to, steal whatever we have left in our house. I mean, like, dude, no.
Look how stupid so many people are. They hate Russia for no reason. They've never been to Russia. They don't know anything about Russia. They don't know why they're supposed to hate Russia. They've been told they hate Russia, and that's it. And it's like, that's the way it is for all this stuff, every little thing. Oh, you got to hate people that don't want a COVID product, where'd that come from? People are just malleable into any kind of scapegoating mass you can. But here's where you tell them to F off, is when we create innovations that outpace tyrants' ability to control us. That's the key thing. That's how the American Revolution was fought. The musket defeated an empire. In the previous time period, to have a combat was a king's game. It was a rich man's game, to have all the sword and all that. That was a rich, that was a rich kid's game. That was the landed aristocracy game, right? And then when they had the musket develop, now the average farmer who wasn't a rich man's game could get out there and hide behind a tree and take one of them rich boys out coming down the road in a red coat, right? So that technology created a different dynamic by which certain forms of tyranny were not going to be capable of being continued in that time period, right? So when you got ocean water or cold fusion powering your home, not the grid, when you have cures for diabetes and cancer and everything without using socialized medicine, when you can get rare earth elements transmuted from trash instead of needing to have access to Russia or North Korea's rare earth elements, when you have all those different changes, that's a different orientation between the human person and the family versus the government and its corporate cronies. And that's why they're fighting like hell to make sure we never even think about those things, that all we think about is diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Don't you think a big part of it is that Christians have allowed non-Christians to propagate the false idea that Jesus came here as a revolutionary? And in particular, he came here as a revolutionary to try to bring and impose these concepts of like justice, egalitarianism. Some people would even try to say that he was trying to bring like democracy and stuff like that. But the thing is that these people are emulating this Jesus that's devoid of his humanity, and that's this Jesus who is who's a basket of ideas come to earth, and that makes them obsess over abstract concepts like democracy or civilization or justice or something that are not really grounded in the human person. They'll try to argue that they are, but there are no flesh and bones to the concept of democracy. But they're sure willing to wage war on other people and bomb them until those people say, I submit, I do believe in democracy, or I submit, I do believe in justice. But the thing is, there is no humanity in that. And because they're denying the humanity of Christ, they're denying love, and that's why they don't have it. That's the reason that they don't have love, is because they're not engaged with reality. And to bring it back to what you were saying, David, when you're not engaged with reality, I don't think you can improve the material conditions on earth. I don't think, I think if you're a revolutionary who is disengaged with reality, I don't think you can deal with the problems of energy scarcity, because you don't have the framework to tackle that scientifically.
Yeah. But they pretended that way because they're the ones that present the whole, we're going to save the climate with credits and solar panels and wind farms and biomass factories. And even Michael Moore's movie Planet of the Humans just ripped apart how much all their little green energy things are scams that can't be scaled or are actually benefiting the very corporations that pollute the worst. So they're just scoundrels. But we have this problem that the average American person is not intelligent in terms of their equipment to be able to process the level of lies here, because you can't have, it's not because of intelligence themselves, but rather where can you get it? Like I was doing research today. You cannot find certain facts that are abundantly known to the rest of the world about America's government's actions on almost any search engine in America. You have to, you go on duck, we thought Google's garbage. Then we go DuckDuckGo, and then you're like, oh wait, DuckDuckGo is censoring too, to find basic facts about, like, for example, the America lying. And, let me give an example. In 1990, America promised the Soviet Union that we would not go 1 inch east, right? Mm-hmm. NATO would not go 1 inch east towards the Warsaw Pact country. And if you Google 1990, if you Google terms like 1990 U.S. promise to not go east to Warsaw Pact or anything like that, you will not find any results that validate that fact. You will see tons and tons of so-called independent media telling you that actually is a myth that the Russians propagate. But if you actually, I had to do some tricky ways to look for it, but George Washington University just released declassified documents showing meticulously that the Americans and their allies were promising just that. They would not go 1 inch east to the Warsaw Pact. But, you can't find it through, traditional means of searching. You have to use all these clever ways to find this little archive, but there's no news media reporting on it. These people who are so sensitive and so considerate of the other, the left always talks about the other. Well, what about the other of the Russians? Why don't you listen and learn history and realize, since you talk about critical theory, about how you're going to reconstruct history? Oh, you're going to find out what's secret about history. Bro, this is 1990. This ain't that long. You know what I mean? This isn't no
Instead, you'll get something about Crimea.
Yeah. I mean, you don't have to even go. Just go to 1990 and find out how we have been lying and sabotaging people for a long time. Sabotage.
Or you'll get something about Chernobyl. That's what they want you to.
We just did a terrorist act against Germany.
Yes.
We did an ecological attack, an environmental catastrophe. Where's Greta Thunberg? CIA plant Greta Thunberg. Garbage.
Well, she got arrested the other day.
Hopeless polluter. What are you going to do with that? You know what I mean? They're doing terrorist attacks against their own allies. Who in the blue world would want to be allies with them?
Are you talking about the Nord Stream pipeline?
Yeah. Seymour Hersh. The only journalists worth anything are 86 and up.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And that's the problem, man, is that, we're going to lose, they're trying to talk about, we're here to reevaluate history. We're going to lose history if we're not careful. But, here's the thing. Here's what's interesting, though. Imagine if we did have a renaissance in atoms. Because right now, you look at the Silicon Valley, they dominate so much of our economy. But I think that's government. I think all those different entities have a very incestuous relationship with government from the beginning, like Google, Facebook, and so forth, right? And I think Silicon Valley is in general just one giant money laundering scheme, where they're pumping in all this money and they're just flowing it into these little gizmos and gadget apps with this illusion of technological progress, when it's really just a house of mirrors of nothingness. Mm-hmm. It's busybody tech garbage. It's busybody work. It's like saying I'm in school every day and I'm an academician, and you're like, what are you doing? Busybody work all day? You ain't even doing anything real. You're not advancing anything. You're just busybody. So government floods in all this credit into Silicon Valley because they got all this Federal Reserve. They can pump in all this money through different means into Silicon Valley, which are assets for their intelligence services and for their interest to subdue the population. Then when you look at the United States government's role in creating pornography, in creating the concept of psychology as a field by which will trump your pastor or your priest for your family. They created this. After World War II, America's government, go read Matthew Crawford's article about was The Sexual Revolution, a Government Psyop by Matthew Crawford, New York Times bestseller. So he's validated by the beast. But read what he says about the origins of the sexual revolution, of them promoting this idea. They were worried. The psychopaths that run the United States government were worried. They said it's something not right. Our bombers that are carpet bombing, cities in Europe, they get burnt out so fast. They can't, after they, kill a few thousand people over and over again, they don't want to do it anymore. And so they got some psychopath psychologists who had really effed up childhoods themselves to come up with this psychology theory that, well, it's because they're proto-fascists in the waiting. They're going to be, because they're Christians and they're working class and they believe in patriarchy and all these different things. And those were values that were holding them back from being able to be more effective killing machines. Isn't that disturbing? So the government sponsors and invests in psychology as a field to supplant the pastor and priest for all things so that they can start to deconstruct those Christian values that were proto-fascist. So they have been pushing and destroying families for generations. And we're all reaping the whirlwind of this, America, in some sense, Americans have been like their lab rats for all the stuff that they're brainwashing the world with right now. They've been tinkering around with psychology theories and gaslighting the American people and investing in tons of money into trying to deconstruct the family and the gender and everything else and stoke racial hatred. They've been doing that for a long time in America, and now they're exporting it to the whole world, I mean, right. You didn't have to export racial hatred to the world. The world already got that one right. The world has always had ethnic problems, but the way in which people cling to victim status as a means of power, right, is something that's a novel concept that's a little bit newer in the world stage than traditional ethnic, conflicts would have been.
Right. They're thinking about sending Lizzo over to Afghanistan.
Really? Are they really?
Something like that, yeah. Afghanistan, being an ambassador for women's rights.
Oh.
Beyonce and Lizzo, guys.
Now, what is the Taliban going to say to her?
Hey.
Well, we'll probably force them to do that too, because the U.S. government is withholding all the funds from the Central Bank of Afghanistan. So there are a lot of people over there that are starving right now.
Right.
And so we'll probably say, well, we might release a little bit of money as long as you allow Beyonce and Lizzo to go over there and have free access to go and shake their booty,
The Taliban will say, hey, we'll talk about white privilege all day. Come on over. White privilege got us $80 billion in military assets. That they're going to say, well, tell us more about this white privilege stuff, Lizzo.
Right.
Take a photo,
right.
But they won't let them mess with their kids though. That's when they're going to tell, Lizzo and Beyonce to get back on that Jeffrey Epstein Express back home to America. You know what I mean?
Yeah, man. This is crazy. Well, what say you? What we gonna do?
Say, what's your thoughts, huh?
Well, as far as I think the only solution to race relations is to recognize Jesus Christ as our King. At the end of the day, I think that's the only thing that we can do. And unfortunately, in the Black church, I think what liberation theology does, I really do believe that it replaces the humanity of Christ with ideas and with like ideals, I guess, of egalitarianism and justice and all that kind of stuff. And when you do that, you end up changing the gospel into not the gospel.
Yeah.
And then anything goes. And so at the end of the day, I think that's the only solution. And it's liberation theology everywhere. It's not just in the Black churches. It's not just in Latin America. It's everywhere. It's it's the fullness of Jesus Christ that has to be preached and understood and encountered.
Yeah. We got to start with the Vatican first, so that liberation theology is taking over, man. I don't know what we're
Yeah, man.
get the rosary, bro.
Yeah.
we fasting and praying this Lent. That's what we're doing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. We need to pray for I think there's a lot of there's a big battle that's brewing in the Vatican,
Yeah.
but the thing that I think that Africa is going to be the bastion of Christianity in 50, 60 years. Not just the demographics of Africa look much better than the demographics of the United States and Western Europe do. And Russia also. But not just that, but the Africans are not backing down on Anthony Blinken and that whole crew were just over in Nigeria during the time of the elections this week. And we're trying to push Nigeria to make abortion ubiquitous, to try to make contraception, to try to make contraception everywhere, to try to push for all these women's liberation movements and things like that, which are really not about women's liberation. It's about busting up the family. And but the Africans are not, some of them are buying it, but for the most part, the Africans are not accepting it. And they're getting psyoped. Our State Department spending millions of dollars to try to interfere over there in their elections.
Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Shane.
The guy that is I guess in the forefront to win. He's he's a Catholic himself.
Yeah.
And of the Igbo tribe. And so yes, I'm sure that's seems like a threat to
what's Nigeria doing right that South Africa isn't doing right?
I don't think it's a question of what is Nigeria doing right. I think is tired of dealing with, first of all, the tribalism.
Who is?
They're tired of dealing with the tribalism.
Which country?
Nigeria, right? Because you have the North, which is majority nomadic pastoralists. Then you have the southern regions, which are mostly agriculturalists and Christians, right? And they're also tired of the terrorism, having to deal with Boko Haram. They're tired of the financial corruption, right? So these are and they're tired of Western interference. Mm-hmm. So it begs the question. I think South Africa is a different that's a different demographic, I think, altogether.
I think in South Africa there's a lot more I think there's a lot more widespread resentment. A lot of it merited, some of it not. But there's a lot of resentment in South Africa, and I think that place is going to be a powder keg for a long time.
Yeah.
But Nigeria, on the other hand, what were they? They were a British colony, Shannon, yes. Or were they? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
So.
Well, very good. What'd you say?
What I was going to say is that I think overall, if you go back and look at the early days of Christian history, where you have different peoples becoming Christianized, in Europe and in North Africa, because obviously Christianity began in Jerusalem in the Middle East. But you see different people whose cultures are being changed by the Gospels in Europe and North Africa. They're able to do something that no other people had really been able to do before in those parts of the world, which was they were able to live together. That they were able to fuse their cultures together. The Gauls were able to or the Gauls and the Visigoths and all them were able to eventually come together, not peaceful all the time, but they were able to come together in a way that they were never able to come together before,
Right.
and fuse together and create one common kind of like overarching culture, and then they all had their subcultures beneath it, but the transcendent principle was Jesus Christ as King. And if you look at pre-Christian Europe in particular, which is what I am the most familiar with, is whenever the Romans would conquer even neighboring tribes, they would wipe them out and or enslave them. They would just wipe them out, though. And that's the way that the Greeks were. That was just typical practice at the time. There's a reason that we don't know. The Etruscans were in Rome, but before the people we call the Romans. Well, there's a reason we don't know a whole lot about the Etruscans, is because they got wiped out. And so because this whole idea of assimilating cultures together and you being able to maintain your culture without fully entirely assimilating into the homogenous culture, that's a uniquely Christian thing. And I think that is, I think that's what we're losing in the West. And I think that's the reason that we're going to see a lot more racial issues. We're going to see a lot more cultural issues. But it's like we're going to be a whole bunch of people that are all speaking different languages, like the Tower of Babel. And we're all going to be speaking different languages. We don't understand each other, and we're all going to be battling. But Africa, on the other hand, they are, the Christians there. Persecution is not very far away from any Christians that live in Africa. Shannon, you mentioned Boko Haram in Nigeria, and they're going after all shades of Christian, Catholics, Orthodox, Methodists, whatever. And that is where Christianity thrives. The blood of these martyrs are fertilizing the future of the church in Africa. And so I think as pessimistic as we can be about the future here in the West, I think we can be very optimistic about the future of the church and even material progress in Africa, because they have all the right ingredients to bake the cake, and we don't. And at some point we're going to break our oven to where even if we have the right ingredients, we're not able to bake it.
I mean, unless we're able to do like you were talking about, right? I mean, what did that sort of process when we see the various groups in Europe coming together under the banner of Christianity? What ensued from that, right? It was the building of universities, right? It was scholasticism. It was the emergence of ideas, being able to, creating books, right, and things like that, right? So that I think ties into like what you were talking about, David, right? Which is this creating a culture that builds, right? If we stop doing that, then we will have stagnation, right? And that stagnation will lead to frustration, and that frustration will lead to violence, right? And so I think we can take the example of what we see happening in Africa, right? And also what has happened in the past and in the medieval ages, and what came of that. So we need to get back into the house of God, start praying, fast during Lent. Right? Let's get back into that. Let's do that. Again, and start doing some doing some things like, take chemistry seriously again,
And we shouldn't give up on liberation theology. We just need to outflank it and put it back into God.
Yeah.
Because
Outface.
Shane, we could talk about what they did wrong with liberation theology, but liberty is a part of the gospel story. The Jews were set free from Pharaoh, and the gospel New Testament, the gospel stories reintegrate that narrative of coming out of Egypt with Jesus. You've got setting captives free being his first sermon. Setting captives free is a part of what the gospel is doing. Liberation theology is just a cheap ripoff of probably some, and to be fair, there's probably some good intuitions and stuff that in that
sure.
world too. But you don't have to throw it out and go back to kind of a gospel that doesn't wrestle with the powers. If you're going to wrestle with the powers, it will be liberating people from tyranny.
Well, we need to fuse love back into we need to fuse love back into liberation theology. Love of the person, and not so much love of the ideal.
Well, that's where, but see, all this goes back to what we've been saying a lot on this show, and Shannon too, about anthropology. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
When you don't have a biblical anthropology, if you just have a theology, you have a disembodied Jesus, which is no Jesus at all. Right.
Yeah.
And so when you actually imitate Jesus and you actually think about what does he reveal about anthropology, then you realize, okay, so then you learn about what Gerard learned about mimetic desire. He gets that from the Bible, and everything is, and everything he got about mimetic desire comes from great works of literature and novels who also were inspired by the Bible. And then the same thing with the scapegoat. That's what liberation theology is grasping in the dark for. It's trying to liberate scapegoats, right? But it's got an arrogance because it doesn't understand mimetic desire, and it doesn't realize that we all scapegoat, that it wants to have this scapegoating, revenge of the nerd scapegoating. That's what.
Yeah.
So that's why anthropology is so important to be equipped back into good theology. Because if just good theology alone, I don't think it's going to cut it, because that's not what the Bible's about. The Bible's not just the study of God. It's the study of who we are as humans. And once we know who we are, we have a better way of understanding how to worship God.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. Right. I mean, I think it boils down to liberation theology in its attempt to liberate those who are scapegoated, in turn scapegoats other people. Right. It finds a scapegoat itself. Right. So it's like it's like they're just, they're reciprocating. They're trying to find a reciprocal for violence. Right. And that's the thing that needs to be, I think, extracted. Right. It's like, what was, whatever, if you want to say an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind, whatever, whatever cliche quote you want to use, but that's the main point.
I think the win-win message of the gospel will be more properly received by the culture when you have signs and wonders in the atomistic world, in the world of material. I think signs and wonders are a down payment for the crowd to listen and to believe in the authority of the message of the body of Christ. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah.
So Jesus was helping people catch fish. He was helping people, feed their bellies. He was resurrecting people's dead kids. You know what I mean? He was healing diseases. Yeah. He's doing everything I'm talking about, right? Because I said cure cancer. Okay. The Christians should be leading that charge. And when we do that, what's going to happen is you're going to create this psychic space where the culture will say, I want to know more. By what authority and by what power did you come up with these great breakthroughs that are now inspiring us to have wonder and dreams again? And then little kids will listen, and they'll want to be a part of a win-win solution. When zero sum is baked into the fabric of the universe, you think the best thing you've got going for yourself is to cling to envy and punch somebody who's different from you because they look like a different race. But when you start to see that God is real and that he is alive in the world, and that he is conquering diseases, and he is trampling out death by death, and that he will make his enemies a footstool. And if you feel like you're a part of a project to have that happen, that's the most exciting thing in the world. And the liberation stuff is a cheap ripoff of this, because if people understood what Rene Girard was saying and equipped it with good theology and a good eschatology, boy, we'd be off to the races. You know, but it's all ultimately it's a heart thing. But I'm talking about from the idea standpoint, that it's going to tether your ideas and passions. You know, it is a heart thing ultimately, but those things equipped together, you know, you can say, my God, wow. You know, because right now, the way theology does with like sins, you feel like it's your will trying to trample down some innate desire in you. But then when you realize, oh, the things that you want really are not from you, it's just an illusion. That's a liberating experience. It's a humbling experience, you know? And then when you realize, wait a second, so this in-group preference and redlining is a part of scapegoating, which is what humans have been doing since the origins. Now you don't have to feel like, well, my race is just the group that gets picked on. Now you can say, wait a second, this is what all humans have been doing since Abel, right? So now you get to get liberated from that bondage, that mental prison, right? The mental prison that if I'm chasing after girls, it's because it's my true desire. No, it's not. And if it's, you know, and then the mental prison of, well, you know, only this group can scapegoat and I have a right to scapegoat because I've been aggrieved. No, that's not what Jesus said. Jesus was dealing with people who were pulverized by redlining and oppression. His own people were being pulverized they were occupied. You know what I'm saying? They were being occupied. They were being systemically oppressed, right? There was Roman privilege, right? And then there was his people, right? And he dealt with people where they were, and he didn't say, you guys are aggrieved, so therefore, you know, it's all right, let's go punch them out. No, it's about taking responsibility for what you can do in the moment, even if you haven't been given a fair starting point like your Roman occupier has, right? Right, Shannon?
Hey, man, it's the feast of we are recognizing the feast of the Transfiguration, or maybe not the feast of Transfiguration, but we're recognizing Transfiguration right now, right? In the Catholic, in the Roman rite, Catholic tradition. So there's your signs and wonders right there, right?
That's good.
Yeah.
There's some transfiguration going on, man.
Well, peace be with you guys. Take care.
You too, David. Thank you.
Spirit, bro. All right, man.